stop the candy just like.
Hello, everybody.
We have candy, people at home, come watch, we have candy, come.
You're right. Welcome, everybody, to the town board work session of Wednesday. That's not Wednesday, this is my last report.
Oh, wow.
It's Tuesday, November
Good
13th.
start.
And I knew I didn't have the agenda. So, welcome, Dr. Bieber and, Peter Zizzo, right?
Yes.
I knew your last name, I
Yeah.
didn't think your first name. I don't wanna call you Zizzo.
Izzo.
Izzo.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, two Z's.
That's a good thing,
So close.
Should've stopped where I was at.
One too many Z's.
I wanna call you Tom.
Alright, so welcome, so we're here to, I know the Chaplain Committee has been working on this RFP and you have come up with a draft and it's actually been reviewed by council, because I know you guys have no experience drafting RFPs, at least I don't think you do. So I know council has reviewed it
And also Fox Hill, or NJ.
Let me just make the first initial inquiry, because you live in
Chestnut.
Chestnut, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm curious, have you engaged anyone, has anyone engaged you, your neighbors, in terms of their views? Since
yeah.
you've been, and so I'm
So
assuming,
they're not keeping quiet.
I'm assuming the minority of people are supporting and the majority are against it, or is that not a fair statement?
I would say this, there are two camps of people and then there's me. There are the people who don't know about it, there are the people
Is that a
who-
large camp?
A decent amount, I gotta say, in the development don't even know what the chap line is or what it's about.
I'm sorry to keep on bust your chops here, but percentage wise, small,
I would probably say maybe 30% don't even know about
Really?
it.
that's.
You have to understand, our development actually has a pretty large immigrant population. So they don't come to the annual shareholders meetings oftentimes. If they don't have kids in school, we all have kids in school, so that's how we kind of network at the bus stop type of thing, and that's where I'm usually kind of approached, or at the farmer's market. The remaining 70%, there's only, to my knowledge, only one person who was actually supportive of it, and I thought it was kind of strange, because I didn't even know what it was yet. So how can you oppose something that wasn't, and I think that was because there was a lot of innuendo, rumors about how it was being put together. So that's part of, I'm on the board, that's why the board nominated me to kind of go and volunteer for this, is because I was more of an open mind to it.
So then to round it out, now how much, is there a substantial population against, substantial for, where are you roughly?
Well, I think everybody's now backed up and said, hey, well, let's figure out what this is first before we oppose it, and I think that the rest of the committee kind of, a lot of people don't understand, when we walked through the development, they kind of understood the three main concerns for us, which obviously beyond it going through the development, parking is an issue, right? Because where the street is, and I think it was a perfect day for people to get a sense of what I was talking about, was happening, we've been a barbecue going on, so with a lot of cars on the street, and the idea is not everyone, the intention is not everyone who's gonna use the chap line is gonna live along the chap line. So to
Right,
get
of
there,
course
some people
not.
have to drive there. So if it's a constant impediment on Saturdays to get around, so the parking is one issue, how we figure that out, I don't know. How it goes through the development, how it's, and where does our liability and responsibility end, and the town's liability and responsibility begin?
Well, and I'm asked this before we get to the RFP, because, my concern is the people who live, I abhor the term NIMBY, because you can care about something and it can impact you and you don't have to live next door to it. And you should look at it, in my view, generally as if you did in fact live next door to it, whatever it may be.
Right.
So the question I'm going back to is, do you believe, based on your conversations, that people are open for this next step? For example, has the RFP been discussed maybe at a broader level, that, hey, we're gonna take these next steps? Or is there people saying, I don't care what you do, how you do it, and
Well,
That would
we
be an
just had-
uneducated.
either way, I'm just understanding, I
Well,
just
we
wanna
just
get
had
a
our annual meeting, to
response.
answer your question, I actually have great feedback for it, we just had our annual meeting, and so I discussed, what it was, and I think we discussed with the committee, if it stays behind the sound barrier, if we can figure out a way for the chap line to be behind the sound barrier, and then.
Closer to the railroad.
Yeah, closer to the railroad, not, because if it just becomes kind of like,
People marching.
spills
through.
out.
right, yeah, like, cause then in essence, the beginning of the chap line is actually at the end of our development, like where our cul-de-sac is,
Right.
right where our pool is.
Right.
And I explained this to the rest of the committee members. Every summer, we do get a couple of instances with some teenagers trying to sneak into our pool. Usually old friends of people who lived or what have you, but even this summer, we had an instance where a bunch of kids came in and went swimming in their boxer shorts, you know, and so if that's happening without the chap line, the concern is, will that volume increase, things like that. So if at the end of the development is where it begins, then basically that's where the beginning of the chap line, we want the chap line to begin outside of our development. So if it goes through behind a wall,
Half mile?
I don't
How
know.
much would that
it's a
add?
half mile,
It's a half
it's
mile.
exactly a half mile.
And this RFP hopefully will in part identify means to do that.
Yes.
Ultimately, not the RFP itself, obviously.
There is
It doesn't
room-
speak to that in the RFP yet, though.
Well, there were three requests, and one was to get it behind the sound barrier, one for an alternative route, which I don't see, but I'm not a civil engineer.
What was the third one?
Yeah, go ahead.
The third one was kind of a blend, so the three requests involved both the properties over on Lawrence Farms
Yep.
and our development, and one was completely avoid Lawrence Farms and go through Chestnut Oaks on behind the sound barrier. The second one was some way of keeping the normal path through Lawrence Farms, how to make that work and go behind the sound barrier, or another way around Chestnut Oaks. And the third one was a blend, more involving Lawrence Farms, not Chestnut Oaks.
I didn't understand the difference between 3 and 1, actually.
Well, three,
read it in the
so
RFP.
one was avoiding Lawrence Farms altogether, one was trying
Going
to
on
avoid
people's
as much as
property.
possible.
Right.
Oh, okay, that nuance wasn't
Yeah.
clear
Wasn't
to me.
obvious.
Yeah.
Well, that,
Maybe
Yeah.
we have to tweak that a little bit.
The overall though, when I read the draft of the RFP, I mean, I think there needs to be a bigger section up front that talks about the background and some of the kind of issues and concerns that you're trying to mitigate with putting forward these different options. Because I think otherwise someone's gonna come to it and they're gonna say, wait, why are they asking me for 3 different ways of doing this? Like what problems are they trying to solve for? And so I
Right.
think up front you have to sort of identify the boundaries, but also identify what some of the other factors are that you're trying to work with and trying to get responses on. So for example, the role of the DEC, DEP and the wetlands concerns. The concerns of the homeowners in Lawrence Farms, east, whichever one that is, south. So some of those issues I think should just be identified upfront so that the respondents have some guideposts as to what it is that we're looking for and some of the issues that they're gonna have to be cognizant of when they come in to do this work.
See, and to add to that, I was thinking that there needed to be even a number 4 to basically say, if we're not giving you parameters, what do you think is the best way to do this? Based, knowing the concerns and knowing there's also a county trunk line that we could potentially use. And leave it up to whoever's responding to this to come up with maybe something that nobody thought of. Because
Okay.
they're the experts.
right.
And let them
But that's
come up
another
with
thing
it.
that needs to be
Don't limit
discussed
it,
up
don't
front, the
limit-
county
don't limit
trunk
it.
line, both the
Absolutely.
possibility of
Right.
it and also the.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So did you mention something in here about the potential parking? Did I miss that?
I think we just alluded to some concerns.
There may be parking at the other end, the Reader's Digest.
another
Yeah.
Right,
issue that
there
needs to
is,
be-
but I would
Yeah.
like to, when they're thinking about where where it starts and where it ends,
Cause getting in and
making
out
sure
of our
that there's-
development, it's the road is
But
now.
those are private roads, so ideally, even if you were gonna have street parking, it wouldn't be
Well,
within
it's a
your
safe-
development, it should be
Correct,
further down.
but how do we police that, you know, it's the
Well, we
question.
can police that, I mean, we have the ability to police that, where, parking from this point on,
That's
but
not
I would like them
everybody.
to consider it.
No, but I.
But we're throwing out things that are important to you, this is
Right.
like one of the first things that you guys mentioned, was the parking, so I think it should definitely be in there somewhere.
We want the path to start where the sound barrier starts, which is
Or even
across-
further out.
or across where the ambulance corps is, with the idea that a continuous, safe walk into town. I see they're putting sidewalks
Yes,
up.
we're putting
We're pushing
sidewalks,
sidewalk
exactly
further,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's on the
So you need a
side of the street,
crosswalk
but-
at some point.
But that
But
property there,
again, not a big deal, yeah, crosswalk.
to Bischoff on the railroad side, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know who owns that, what's the rights are there.
But
Ideally, if it could be extended there, the path to Bischoff.
I mean, I felt like this just needed to be a little more open-ended, and instead of the RFP, while I think it should give parameters, instead of it giving completely like, you need to do 1, 2, and 3, I thought it should be more open-ended and let someone who's the professional, who's gonna respond to this, come in and tell us, look, given all these issues and concerns and thoughts that people have, what is the best way to do this?
Okay. And by the way, it's not, listen, we're, who's ever against it, in favor of it, the reality is, it may come back and it may be cost prohibitive, and it's a non-issue.
Right, this is why I didn't wanna, that's why, to answer your question, I don't wanna oppose it, because why put up a fight for something that can't happen anyway?
Exactly.
Or if it is happening, maybe it happens in a way that everybody's kind of okay with, and realize it's actually kind of a good thing.
I think it's tremendously beneficial if it works right, you're never gonna make everyone happy.
Right.
But again, to my point is that,
But they're open-minded now, I think
And
they
that's
are a
that's
little bit open-minded, they're still skeptical, but we need
Right, right,
details.
right.
I think
So,
there's off the
but-
Chapel Crossing.
But to this point that it may prove not to be, it may prove to be cost prohibitive, the way that we've drafted this RFP is
too
very,
closed.
no, it's
Well.
very broad, there are a lot of tasks, and it includes everything up to and including management and oversight of the construction work. And I would pull back from that, I would suggest doing a phased contract, so that
Yeah,
you
I
have a
agree.
first phase that's all around planning and design, everything
And
up to.
preliminary
Feasibility.
cost estimates.
Everything
Well,
up
that's what-
to giving, let me finish, everything up to giving that initial cost proposal. At that point, there's a decision gate, and if we at that point decide to proceed, there ought to be the option to extend the contract into a phase 2 or a phase
So you
3.
was
can
gonna
save,
bring that up.
so basically it's money savings, you're not spending more money for something you don't potentially need.
Right, so what we've done traditionally on this is that we have still gotten pricing on all of the tasks with the option of only awarding 1 through 2 or 1 through 4 upfront. But then we still at least know what the rest of the price proposals are, so that if we are in a position to apply for a grant, we have all those additional numbers with us.
So, I
Right.
mean, you could do it that way or,
But yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
I don't have a problem with the pricing on the task, but I agree that this feels like it's one big huge proposal.
It is.
As if it's going
Yeah, that's
forward,
Yeah.
whereas in reality, there is a go, no-go point. And that go, no-go point, is right after,
Well,
what I think should be is conceptual drawings shown to the town board. That's gonna have to be tweaked, which is not included in this,
That was a
because-
closed issue because it needs to be allowed.
no, but I mean, at some
whoever
point,
design it.
they're gonna get feedback and they're gonna have to make adjustments. And at that point, based on whether it's plan A and plan B, cause you only have conceptual plan 1 and conceptual plan 2 kind of moving forward. But based on that, you would then move to the next thing, which is how much this is gonna cost, once everyone kind of feels that the needs are met of the community. They should have a ballpark estimate, like this one's gonna probably be more expensive, this one's less expensive. They should be able to articulate that without exact numbers.
Can I ask
But it's
you-
almost like the design development,
But why show us,
Yeah, but-
why show us a Mercedes if we can only afford a Honda?
well, we already have a
But there's no
Mercedes,
downside to
this
this
has
getting the
lighting on it,
response.
this has
There's
got
no- it
page,
doesn't
you know,
cost
the
any
way
money
that
to
they're
get
doing this
response.
is already I'm looking at this, and when I look at the
We're not asking- it doesn't
specifications
cost any money
that
to-
you have,
Right.
stormwater
It just may
managed,
scare people away
drainage,
'cause it's too much
lighting,
work
this,
to
that, so on
respond.
and so
Wait, wait,
forth.
wait, so that's everything that Bob Seoli put in, because that's what's required in order to build this. So it already has gone through council and Bob Seoli. I'm not saying it can't be changed, what I'm saying is that
but
those
all-
things that have been included
Yeah, I
may
don't-
not
we don't
necessarily
have the
can't-
final
they didn't,
draft.
yeah.
But
And then the other question I had is, you know, right now, as I said, this is much, I mean, it would be nice, it would be paved, and it would be lighter, it would be this, it would be that, it would be ADA compliant, you know, versus a jogging path. I mean, I'm assuming that the committee wasn't interested in sort of doing like the equivalent of, you know, a combination boardwalk slash, you know,
Yes, no.
road
No,
improvement.
we discussed the different options, that's, we try to be as detailed and think of as many possibilities, things you wanna know, like whether you can build over the sewer system, we don't even know you can build that, they have
Right.
access to it, don't they? Is that gonna be manholes in the middle of a path, or, I mean, there's a lot
So
of
there,
unknowns.
there were a number, my question was, and I've never done an RFP for, and really only one person on the committee has any experience with RFPs, is all those questions need to be answered. I'm not quite sure from your perspective what matters most to you first. I mean, does it matter to get around the communities first? Is that the most important thing? If that's the most important thing, that's an easy RFP to put out. But going around the committee then raises the next step is, in order to go around the committee, we run into these different roadblocks. Wetlands, you know, building over sewer trunk lines and things like that. So now we go back to going through the community, now we have those other problems, and we still have going over wetlands, easements from, whether it be Con Ed, if we stay behind the sound barrier, I don't know where our property line ends and where theirs begins. And they don't give us any headache about that wall, because it doesn't affect them, but if you're gonna have people walking through their property, they have to grant an easement on their property. So where I think, in my opinion, should start is getting somebody in to look at the path and design a path that can go through, you know, assuaging the property ownership concerns, or just saying we can't do it without going through these properties. At that point, you go to the next stage, right? Or I don't know how an
Yeah, I
RFP
mean,
works.
Well,
We
it
know
should say
that's not
that-
true, because
what's
we
the
know it can be
downside?
done
And
without
it's that we
going through
shouldn't have an
properties,
imperfect
so
RFP holding us up.
we want them
Well, it can
to
be,
look
but
at that.
What's the
Correct.
downside of just asking for everything?
That's what I'm saying, I don't know.
if we use
There's
the
no
trunk
downside
line.
to just
That
having.
is the trunk line goes through the property.
Yeah, the
It's
trunk
not
line,
necessarily cost prohibitive if we.
You don't have to follow the trunk line, is the
right, the
point.
trunk line does go through the property.
Well, the plan that was
Well,
done
what's
by
the
the
other
county
one that doesn't?
It
avoided,
does go through.
No, the trunk line
it
does.
Some of them
It
doesn't.
avoided all private property.
it avoided all private property
It
and
was basically a raised boardwalk throughout the
Which
entire.
that became prohibitively expensive.
That was 10 million.
The reason
That's
that you
right.
have to have the raised boardwalk is because of the wetlands.
But
Yeah,
there
you
may be
need
other
art.
options, maybe it's not paved, maybe
Yeah,
it's
it could be-
gravel,
it could be
maybe
a
it's
stone
just
Well,
Well, that's
roads,
what I'm
maybe it's.
saying is, this is
that's
like a
what we have to
Cadillac
look at.
plan and
It's
it
not,
may
it's
not-
just an option, it's just trying to
But
get
I
as
mean,
many
if
options
you
as
But
read
that's
possible.
why it's not
if you
broad
read the
enough.
RFP as it is stated now, with all of the requirements that are in there, it's as if you're building a promenade.
Right, I think it's not broad enough, I think it's putting too many restrictions on somebody instead of saying, what is the best way to do this? What's the best way to avoid properties, what's the most cost-effective way of doing this, and let
Proper materials,
somebody come up
considering-
with
yeah,
an
I agree.
idea instead of
Right, considering the
the
wetlands,
committee
the
just
private
giving
property,
the ideas,
security.
that's, we want a
privacy.
professional to say, look,
I
we
was
can
gonna say
do
you have four
this,
amateurs.
we have all these options of how we can
Which is
do it
fine.
from, you know, most
No, you guys have to have
expensive
done a great
and most
job. Yeah, it's fine.
invasive to least expensive and least invasive
maybe-
and
Getting
let
so
them
much
figure it
feedback.
out.
Well,
Well, that's what I'm saying, I don't know
Well,
if
maybe
that's
the
what's,
best- well-
is there an RFP to do that, to have somebody come and assess it? And if they do assess it, they can say, here are our concerns, right? We have these concerns on the Chestnut Oaks Pass, we have these concerns over by Lawrence
Right.
Farms. And this is what our goal is, we
Right.
wanna connect this to this, how do we do it? And let somebody else apply that, and these are the, and they're gonna know
That's
that
how
we're
I
going
think it
through
should be
wetlands.
And that's consistent with what Ivy was saying, so basically maybe we just expand the upfront, we put in what the goal is, we put in what the issues are, what our concerns are.
And put a maximum
and
dollar
what,
amount.
and what are the different
No, I
things.
wouldn't do anything.
Well, just let them come back and
Let
see what
them
they
come
say,
back and see.
but these are all our concerns. You know, we have issues with,
Because
you know,
when they give
easements
you-
and no easements, and we want you know, privacy, and we have wetlands and security for the school, and what do you suggest, you know, that type of
Right,
thing.
and the reality is
That's a
that
big piece, this.
there,
Can I make one more recommendation about something to add to this? I don't, and this, I want your opinion on this as well. I think you have the opportunity here to also ask the consultant to research funding opportunities and grant opportunities as a part of this.
Absolutely.
So they should be looking for ways to fund.
And they're
because that's
probably-
the
they're
other thing
probably
that you
familiar
could put up,
with
yeah, you could put up front is the fact that right now, we've got cross-country teams from the high school that run along Route 117 and truck route with no shoulders. And we're trying very hard to find a, you know, a safe path. You know, we've tried sidewalks, it's very prohibitive due to the New York State DOT's requirement of a, you know, 5-foot snow shelf, 4-foot sidewalk that literally we have to do takings. So it's very cost prohibitive, they've been very inflexible in their requirements. And so that's really what's been forcing our hand to take a look at other options
Yeah.
to get from point A to point B.
And once Chappaqua Crossing opens, there's gonna be significantly more traffic on those roads, so we really want a safe way for these kids to.
And the truth
get
is
to
also,
school.
there's a lot of funding opportunities, cause you're basically, it's a trail that's leading to two business districts. It's a trail that's connecting two business districts, it's a trail that's leading to a school, so people can walk to school.
Connecting to
There's
schools,
grants,
too.
there's grants for all that stuff, it's also a trail that's leading people to walk to the train station, there's grants for that. rails to trails and then there's walking, there's tons of, this is eligible for a lot of
I mean,
grants
grants are
for a
great,
lot of different reasons.
getting them is a different story.
Right, no, but this checks off a lot of boxes, it really does.
What we did is we took the old proposal and then
Right.
just modified it, maybe some people here think the old proposal was too detailed.
No, it's fine, I have to tell you that it's, that
We know what
that I
the old
think
proposal came back with, which is
Right.
$10 million.
It's not gonna come back less.
Yeah, but no,
No,
well,
that
you know,
was
it's, this is a fertile conversation because you guys did such a good job. And the fact that you gave the board something concrete to
Yeah.
look at and be able to,
Yes.
you know, decide, yes, we like this, no, we don't like, we think that, you know, you've been a little bit too, you know, constrictive here and you should have been a little more open-ended. That's why we can have the conversation, otherwise we just be talking in circles, so this is actually tremendously helpful.
Right, and it is a good idea to have something up front that basically says, this is what we're trying to accomplish, these are our concerns. And that's why, even if you leave the options, and that's why we're presenting different options. Because, you know, if we can avoid the private property, that's great, if we certainly wanna avoid the wetlands, or go over the wetlands, you know, we're not looking to build a boardwalk, mile and a half boardwalk, that's not the goal of this thing. There's a path there already, we're trying to just improve it so that people can use it without
Yeah,
impeding on
it
other
is, it
people's
could
privacy.
be a seasonal path versus an all year round path, I mean,
Well, it's
these are
not
big
gonna go year
questions.
round, I mean, the cost to make it all year round, to plow
just
it,
saying.
remove snow.
Yeah.
It's gonna be,
Well,
yes.
that was the other thing, the
That's-
ongoing
so then I
maintenance
think it
cost
should
that
be
we
something
didn't
that
know.
needs to be
It needs to be
the
included, that this
goals
is
of
a
the
seasonal path, it's not something that we anticipate using,
Unless you snowshoe or cross
Well,
country ski.
well, that would be fine.
That's a great point.
That's the same as
Thank
North County, that's a seasonal.
And the Broadstone
Yeah, that's
Parkway
not
is
bad.
Patrol me,
Right now.
to the lady from DeVoe Place,
Okay.
thank you, I will now,
Alright.
I don't even remove the leaves.
But
Alright, so we're already way
Bronx
behind.
Path.
don't talk,
Oh.
don't say leaves.
It's
Don't-
packed
Should we-
up
should we-
there, it's packed.
We're 8:15.
Yeah, we're gonna, once again, Jill, your goals and
So
objectives.
thank you guys,
It's
you
not
know,
mine,
you
but
guys,
it's not
you
really
really
stuff.
put in a
It's
ton of
actually
work
not
on
my
this.
goal.
So
And
let's finish up here because
So what's the
we're,
charge now, you're gonna alter it or we're gonna alter it?
You guys
We're
are,
gonna alter it.
You are.
We're gonna alter it and then they're gonna finalize the draft.
Yeah, especially with an upfront paragraph about what you're trying to,
The goals
Like
and
a mission
concerns.
statement.
I think
Yeah.
it's, I think it's
Yeah.
more than a
Like a mission
paragraph, I think
statement.
it should be a background statement, then what it should be is,
Dump your thoughts on the paper.
you know, area of key
Yes,
concerns,
right.
of areas
All
of
of their
note that
collective
need
Because
them to
what we,
pay
that they
attention
can't,
to.
they're not mind reading.
And then what you're
Notes,
looking for is
Lawrence,
a creative
Fox Crossway.
solution to cost effectively connect the two districts, you know. And you could keep, for example, option one could be avoiding private property, option two.
I don't think we give them options.
I'm
I
just
think
saying
we
it-
just
what I'm
say,
saying is-
these are our concerns, how's the best way?
To address
To-
all of them.
What's
Maybe.
the opportunity,
But are we
what
gonna
are the
determine the
challenges?
endpoint?
And I think the gating, as Ivy said, is good too, which is why don't we just get through the feasibility analysis? And then, no, I know, but it should be gated and there should be a clear point at which they know the contract goes forward or doesn't go
Yeah.
forward. It shouldn't be left in sort of limbo.
No, but I think we have to make clear that we're not entering into a contract to provide all of these.
right,
tasks.
Right,
right,
it's
right,
option
absolutely,
one,
and
two,
that's it,
three.
you
That's why it
basically
should be
say
staying.
that,
Well,
you
that's
know,
for
it's
the
our-
feasibility, they're not gonna do the task, they're gonna
right, they're gonna give you a
outline
pricing for what everything is, but
Right.
we just have to make it
to
clear that
to analyze the task.
when we award the contract, that we're not,
Yes.
that our first phase is only gonna award tasks 1 through 5.
Correct, that's right.
And then
Right.
Right.
we'd like them to keep tasks, 7 through 12, these pricing, save it for a year or whatever it is.
Right.
just so we have
Well, the
an
thing you have to remember though, the first task is how do you, which does the path go through to address these concerns? How you do that then is gonna determine the materials you have to use,
Right.
because if you're going over wetlands, you're gonna use different materials,
Right, but
then
so what's going to happen is that they're gonna sit down and talk to you, they're gonna take a look at maps, they're gonna come up with some
They're gonna walk it.
basic drawings and get some feedback from the board as to, these are our 4, just general ideas as to where we're going. Tell us which ones you think are the best paths for us to pursue, we'd like to pursue like 2 instead of 12. And then those would be the ones that they go and they do the conceptual drawings for and things like that. And we would have public outreaches and, introduce them to the community, see what their concerns are, see whether or not we've hit all the right spots, whether or not we were able to avoid the hot spots that really concern people. I mean, we're not doing this to aggravate anybody, we're doing it to try to, present a walkable path that's accessible, that's safe for people to walk on. It's gonna,
yeah. I don't disagree, I think once there is actual detail to broadcast, I think then you'll get a sense of who's actually for or against it.
Right.
That's why I've tried not to, people, don't get me wrong, I get stopped at the farmer's market,
sure
cause
you
somehow, this was
You
in
know
a
what,
newspaper or
reminded me,
something
I
like that.
had one more thing I wanted to tell you about it. I think you have to include somewhere in there a public comment process. So there's things in there that talk about presentations to the town board, but we need to also have presentations to the.
I thought that was the next phase of this, once we have an actual proposal, then there's
Yeah,
some
we
way of
may
getting
decide
feedback.
that it doesn't, we may look at it and decide there's
Yeah.
no way it
Maybe
makes
cost
sense.
prohibitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it may be, you know what,
It never
I will
gets
ask
to that
about
next
that,
step.
yeah.
Okay, I thought there was a selection process that was happening prior to the cost. So when I read it, it looked like you're gonna give us examples, you're gonna show us those examples, we're gonna decide which one we want, and then they're going to cost it.
See, and what I would
I
suggest
think
that's
we
the
need
way
this
it's written
first,
right
cause
now.
otherwise it's
No,
a waste of time.
Well,
That
that's one of
report
my
itself
comments,
costs
is
money.
that
No, no.
in task 2, which is the one where you give the options, you ought to have at least a rough cost estimate
Exactly.
attached to each of those options,
Right.
so that the decision-making process happens
Ballpark, a
with.
range, low, high, low.
Right.
Right, but the other thing to remember, maybe I'm a little confused, the report itself is gonna cost money.
Oh, yes, yes.
Right.
No, we're talking about
No,
the
no, no,
cost
we
to
understand that.
construct.
Oh, okay, alright, so,
Yes,
okay,
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
Okay.
not the,
No, no, no.
yes.
gotcha, so,
We're talking about when
so,
they give us options,
When
There
they give
should
us
be-
options,
yes,
be an
of course.
approximate cost
How
associated
we
with
detailed
it.
the
Feel some of them or
costs.
accept some of them.
yeah, how detailed the report we receive is gonna reliably determine the cost of that report. So the more detail they want, the more expensive the report will be, that's where I think maybe I wasn't understanding what you were
Right,
saying.
We're
but
not talking
usually
about the
with
report,
conceptual-
we're
usually
talking
with
about
conceptual
the
drawings, so-
actual construction of the chap line, if they
Right.
come up with ideas, they need to tell us what the
course.
approximate cost
Right.
of constructing that idea is, and they may have 10 options.
A lot of people
Right.
waiting.
But
I know.
in order for
I have
us
a lot of
then
people waiting.
to sit
Right,
and the
it's
public
the,
to sit
it's
and
the
figure that out, if
appreciation
one's
for it.
$5,000 and one's $50 million, you know, that
We
would
have a presentation.
weigh on how we're gonna judge
I
the
get
option.
it, I was, that's why I was a little confused talking about different costs, I thought you were talking about cost of different reports, I was like.
No.
We gotta,
Full bill,
we gotta
like
break.
2 million,
We
5
have a
million
lot
to
of
that.
people waiting.
We have to
So when
break.
I built the new firehouse, and it was just a blank piece of property, we went through something called we actually had something like a coster as part of the design team, part of the overall team. So we had, for example, conceptual design, there was a cost range, and it was well understood, that could be
Not
20,
just 2 ways more.
25% off, but
Yeah,
at
no,
least
no,
it gave you
money,
a
sure,
ballpark.
Yeah.
So I think the same thing, so that's at the conceptual phase, and then each time it moves down, they refine their costing to be more accurate as
First
they become,
responders here for that.
as the drawings become more detailed.
Okay,
A lot of first
no, I get it, I wasn't understanding, but I know what we need to do.
Alright,
Or else I'll have a pretty good
okay,
day.
alright, we gotta break, we got a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah.
Thanks,
well,
guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Alright, so let's, motion, we're gonna have to adjourn the other
Yep.
stuff. Motion to adjourn,
So moved.
all in favor?
Aye.